Now that the cast is set, we need to think about cutting it off. In order to do that, we're going to use a cast cutter, which I'll show you in a moment, but we need to decide where we're going to make some cuts on the cast in order to remove the foot. So I've got a marking pen here. I'm going to make 2 cuts. It would have been nice if I had the cutting guard, that blue cutting guard, showing it up the top here, but I haven't. I've covered it with my wrapping. But never mind, I'm going to make some cuts, something like this. And this may have to be adjusted later if it's not big enough. I want to avoid these points, these malleoli, because we're going to need to mark them later. They'll show us our axis or allow us to determine our axis of rotation of the ankle. So we're going to cut somewhere along those lines. Now in order to make the cuts, we're going to use a cast cutter, which is this. It's a rather vicious looking instrument. I'll just turn it on for a moment, it's very noisy. The blade actually oscillates backwards and forwards, and it doesn't rotate even though it looks like it rotates, and it's quite safe if it comes into contact with soft tissue. However, when it's in contact with something rigid, it does make a cut. Now in order to use it, you make a series of pushes down into the casting material, like so. Like a number of steps. You don't use it like a circular saw, you don't go along, although it will work like that sometimes. It can create some heat when it's being used, but this shouldn't be a problem for our subject because he's got a sock and a guard, and so he shouldn't feel any of the heat from it. So we'll just make those cuts now. Now we haven't cut this piece totally off, but we're going to see if we can remove the foot before finishing that part off. This can be quite tight, and that after all is the idea of the boot, for it to be tight. If we have too much trouble here, of course we might have to modify the cuts that we make. This one's come off quite easily. So I'm going to remove the cutting guard and the stocking guard from inside. It's become fairly firmly attached inside the boot. Indeed, it's quite a stubborn one. The most stubborn one yet. Okay, so that's removed it. I'm going to trim off this excess piece of cast here, and then we're going to put the boot back on the subject for a moment. The reason for removing that last little piece while the boot is off the subject is that I just wasn't sure how far the cutting guard was covering. And while, as you saw, the cast cutter is quite safe, it's better to be even safer. So we'll put the boot back on. This also can be quite difficult at times. And the reason for doing that is I want to mark the positions of the most prominent parts of the bones down here at the ankle. And using those landmarks, we can figure out the axis of rotation later on. And that will be important when we glue some posts at the side to know that axis of rotation of the ankle. So I'm just going to do that by feeling with my finger here. And marking that point. Now, some people with a good anatomical eye can actually rotate the ankle backwards and forwards, and they can make an estimate of the axis of rotation from doing that backwards and forwards movement. This will have to set properly overnight. It's an advantage to rinse it in water and to let it dry out. That will finish off any drying process, and then we're ready for the next step of doing some final trimming and gluing the posts on the side.